I mean, I felt easy to love in those circumstances, that I felt like love was abundant, and that was a really wonderful feeling.
Welcome to Normalizing Non-Monogamy, the podcast where we interview incredible people from across the entire spectrum of non-monogamy to hear their fascinating stories. We always strive to bring guests on the show who have a healthy and positive approach to non-monogamy.
However, everyone approaches this a little different, and at its core, our show is about hearing and learning from the different experiences and approaches people have. With that in mind, it's important to remember that the views and opinions expressed by our guests do not necessarily reflect those of our own.
It's also important to remember that we aren't doctors or therapists and that we produce this show for entertainment purposes only. Please consult a medical professional for anything regarding your health that you might learn about on this show.
One final thing that we need to let you know about is that this podcast will hopefully include some explicit language. So, if that kind of thing offends you, we suggest you just keep listening until it no longer does. However, if you're under the age of 18, you should probably stop listening or gather up your parents and listen as a family. Enjoy! Hi, real quick, Finn here. I just wanted to quickly say before I toss it over to Emma that we do a couple of quick announcements at the beginning of this one. It lasts about 8, maybe 9 minutes, and it's not something we're going to do very often, but we wanted to, at the start of the year, just get some information out there and get some feedback from you. So please bear with us, and we won't do this to you again for quite a while, hopefully.
Welcome to episode 43. We're Finn and Emma, right?
Well, I'm Finn, you're Emma.
Yes, we do that every time.
We do it every time.
Today we have an exciting interview, as always.
Yeah, we've got an interview with Aleah. She is one of the partners of one of our previous interviewees, Vaughn.
Yeah, on episode 26.
So if you want, go back and listen to that one. However, it is not necessarily required listening, but that's the Vaughn we're talking about.
Yes.
Thought that should be important for you to know.
Yes, exactly. And then we have a couple of other fun announcements here at the beginning.
Yeah, we mentioned last week that we have lots of awesome stuff happening, and we wanted to talk about some of that for this year, but we didn't mention it last week. Don't really know why. We're going to do it now.
Because we're still working on things.
Yeah, so the first thing that we can unveil, actually, you know what? Before we unveil anything, let's thank some people from this year.
Yes.
So we did...
I mean last year. No.
Last year, yeah. Well, that's the other thing. Yeah, last year. So we did roughly 40... Well, we published 40 interviews in 2018. And we started in May, and we've had literally, like, the most fun we've had in a long time.
Yeah, it's been a blast.
We've loved doing the show. We've met tons of other content creators, and we've had tons and tons of people reaching out, like just listeners. Some of them have come on the show. Some of them have just given us really kind feedback and told us how much we've helped them. So we just wanted to say thank you to everybody who's reached out to us.
Yeah, we love the reviews too. They're super helpful and makes us smile every time we get one.
Yeah.
And literally, like, every time we finish one of these interviews, we look at each other and we say, well, that was really fun. That was awesome. Like, so this is really...
And we learned something.
Right. And it would not happen without all of you.
Yeah. So thank you to all the listeners, even the ones who don't leave us reviews. This isn't us begging for reviews.
Oh, no.
It was just, we wanted to say thank you to everybody who's reached out to us. And if you haven't reached out to us, please do so. One of the ways you can do that now, rather than just sending us an email, is sending us a voicemail.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. And, well, that's a really good lead-in to our brand new website, same old address, new website. So
normalizingnonmonogamy.com.
Cleaned it up a little bit, made it look a little more fancier, and yeah.
On the Contact Us page, you can send us an email, or, like Finn said, you can send us a voicemail now by clicking the link there.
Yeah, it's not a voicemail tied to your phone. We're not going to get your phone number or anything. It's just a little button. You push it, send us an email with an audio recording. So go do that, try it out, send us some kind words, and yeah. We won't play it on the show unless you want us to, and even then we might not, because that's not really what we do. But we could.
Yeah, we'll see.
Okay. One other thing that we wanted to talk about, and we've mentioned this in the past, is regarding some of the resources. And I know some of you probably just skip ahead at this point, so just hold on 2 seconds before you do that. We are continuing to try and find new resources. Some of them are support the show financially if you use them through affiliate links, and some of them don't. So we've got a new one that we wanted to talk about today, but before we did that, we wanted to just throw it out to you as the listeners. Is this stuff that you want us to keep doing? Keep finding these things for you and keep presenting them to you. One option would be to do this as a way to offset some of the costs of hosting. The other is if you're like, I'm really sick of listening to the roughly a minute and a half of us mentioning resources, we could do a like ad-free version for like a $2 a month Patreon or something like that. We don't know.
We're just thinking through ideas right now. Yeah,
we're open to ideas, and we'd love to hear what people think. Again, we struggle with that one because all of the things that we have found we find beneficial to the listeners, and we try to either give a discount or a free trial or something. And I think that will always be the case because really we're not bound by any of these companies since they are just affiliates. They're not paying us like $100 an episode to talk about them, and we have to say this much, talk for this much time. We don't have any of those constraints, and we don't really plan to. So yeah, I'm a rambler, but we.
So you're rambling a little bit.
Yeah. So I guess the point is, our goal is to always try to keep it to like maybe a minute and a half at the beginning, and maybe a minute or a minute and a half at the end, at the most. So let us know what you think on that. The new one we got is
My One Condoms, which is really cool, actually.
Yeah, this was mentioned in the last episode with Bill and Felice. This is something that he kind of discovered when he had to start using condoms after being married for 33 years and not using them. Mm-hmm. He struggled a little bit with that. And so he found these, which are basically custom fit condoms.
They have like 60 sizes.
Yep, 60 different sizes. You can go online and like print a little sizing kit, or you can order a sizing kit, and basically you figure out which size you need, and then they fit you much better. And yeah, some of the reviews on their website are fantastic, and as soon as we're back in the US, I'll be measuring my own
try them out.
My own self and trying them out. So yeah, we're excited for that. And what you get is
10% off any order using the code Emma.
Emma, that's you.
Yes.
And yeah, so we'll put the links in the show notes here. We'll put them on our website, on the resources page, and on the show notes there.
Give them a try and definitely let us know if you like them.
Yeah, let us know what you think. Again, we haven't used these. We've heard good things about them, but we don't have the chance to use them right now. The other one that we'll mention real quick at the beginning here is STD Check. We mention this one every week, and we love it, and it seems that a lot of you are loving it as well. It's a super easy way to get tested for STIs. It's also pretty cost effective. It's about $200 for a full 10 test panel, but you save $10 if you use the link on our website, and you support the show. Oh, that was the other thing. The My One Condoms, we worked out this deal with them, but there's no affiliate there. That's just, we went to them and said, hey, you got awesome shit. Let's give it to our listeners and give them a discount. And they said, let's do that. And so we're doing that.
Yeah.
Now I think we can stop rambling. Oh, no, we can't.
Another one?
One more quick thing. I'm sorry that you're still with us, but this interview was the first interview that we recorded after roughly like a 2-month break of not doing interviews. So,
oh yeah, we are a little rambly with our questions.
Our questions are a little all over, but we kind of hit our stride about halfway through. It's still an awesome interview, and Aleah does an awesome job of answering our questions,
even though fielding our questions.
Yeah, so thank you.
Her story is really unique and interesting too.
Yeah, she's a very awesome outlook on life.
Yeah.
And so we're super excited for this one. Now we are done. Let's go to the interview, and we will see everybody on the other side.
Let's go.
Ready?
Yeah.
You ready?
We always have this.
It's awkward. It's super awkward, just like everything in the...
Yes.
So, welcome, Aleah, to the podcast.
Yeah.
We've been trying to make this interview happen since, I think, July. It's been a long time. So
Thanks for being consistent.
Oh no, we will nag everybody until they come on the show. It doesn't matter who you are. So we were put in touch.
That was just a second. That was a little negative. You need to be a little more positive about that.
It wasn't nagging. It was bad timing on her part, and then our part, and then her part. So here we are. Everybody's
We just
happy.
will lightly encourage you to come on the show if you're at all interested. That's a better way to say it.
I nag.
Okay, go ahead.
But anyway, we were put in touch with you by one of your partners who was on episode 26 of our show, Vaughn. And so he said, well, Aleah might want to come on the show. And it turns out you did. So thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yay. So I guess for anybody, including us, who doesn't know that much about you, do you mind just sharing some brief background, rough age, and sort of what the overall dynamic looks like for you, and then we can prod deeper.
Sure. So I'm in my early 30s, living on the East Coast, and Vaughn and I have been together for a couple of years. For me, I relate to the phrase open relating, which is sort of maybe a bit adjacent to polyamory. Polyamory, in its essence of the word, means multiple loves. And I'm interested in the realm including and beyond love, and maybe not having the objective of a deep, loving, committed relationship in all of my encounters. So I'm open to all sorts of things that look a little differently. So.
Okay. So everywhere from maybe like a casual encounter up to a new long-term relationship. You just kind of leave it open-ended?
Yeah, so I don't like to put people into boxes. So I find that when I go to date, sort of the traditional thinking that I think many of us have been conditioned to is, what are you looking for? That's a really common phrase. It's like, well, I'm looking for a gray area, like let's explore something for me more than a purely sexual encounter up into, like you said, a long-term loving relationship. So, and that can make people a little bit uneasy because we don't like to always live in the gray. And
sure.
So I throw that out there. And if people are willing to jump on board and see what becomes of things, then that's great. And, that's not for everyone.
Yeah. Have you found largely that people are open to that? I know it's a lot of people like to say I'm poly or I'm a swinger, and by leaving it a little more gray, have you found people pretty receptive to that?
Yeah, I think for the most part, I think that it takes a little bit of sort of explanation or finesse to help people to see where I'm coming from. And I think that that's the portion that can sometimes be a hindrance, let's say, because it takes time to understand where people are coming from if they're not traditional in their relationship background, or people that are new to the scene. Right.
So how did you evolve to have this, wanting this relationship style? Have you always felt that way since you were little, or has it evolved as you've gotten older?
It's certainly evolved. I'm always evolving.
I think most people are. But
yeah, totally. That's what makes life so exciting, right?
Exactly.
So I had some questions about monogamy pretty early in my formative years. I think I remember saying to my parents, fairly young in my, early 20s, like, oh, this monogamy thing, I'm not really sure about it. And I was in a relationship that I was interested in opening up, and it took quite a long bit of months to convince him that I wasn't trying to trick him into anything, that I really did want to explore with other people. So eventually we did open up, and that looked much more similar to a traditional kind of open relationship in that we had sex with other people, but our emotional connection was primary. Mm-hmm. And I found that I struggled with that, and that wasn't something that really worked for me. So we parted ways.
Was it a struggle in the sense that you found yourself developing more feelings for other people, or was it, I guess, in what way did you find it a struggle?
Yeah, I did find that I was interested in having an emotional connection, and just the allowance and that exploration piece that I felt like restricted in that. And so I don't know if it was the restriction that made me want to explore that more, or it was just something that I sort of fell into with a partner or two that I was spending time with, and I enjoy their company. So eventually there was going to be some kind of emotional connection there for me.
Sure. And so you mentioned that you had this conversation early on. You mentioned it to your parents. Since then, have you continued to be open with them about how things have evolved, or have you sort of dialed back and not shared as much since that point?
So they know that I'm non-monogamous. I've kept it at that for the most part. I have introduced them to Vaughn and speak about another partner of mine, sort of on the periphery. But I find that they can be a little bit overwhelmed and have some questions about my relationship style that can seem offensive at times.
Sure.
Yeah, just kind of keep it at an arm's length as far as talking about that type of part of your life.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess to maybe clarify for people and for us, do you feel that you have like a primary partner and then secondary or tertiary partners, or do you sort of see it as everybody's at a level playing field and it's just different lengths of time that you've been with people?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting topic. I don't know that I'm the best to articulate this, but for myself, I practice non-hierarchical relationships, which to me means that my partners and myself create sort of our own boundaries and guidelines for ourselves and our relationship, and that those don't impact my other relationships, that they are autonomous in themselves. And yeah, as far as spending time with people or how long I've been with a partner, certainly that stuff influences, and it's an ebb and flow.
Right.
But yeah, I'm still kind of feeling that out for myself and like unpacking what that means, and if I'm spending this amount of time with a partner versus this partner, and sort of how that works.
Yeah, how do you manage some of that time? Because I can imagine if you're with somebody for a couple of years, it would seem that maybe they feel like they want to spend more time with you, and if you're trying to manage that with other people, and also maybe along the same lines, do you ever find yourself in a relationship with somebody who themselves is not non-monogamous, and how does that play out, if at all?
I hear a couple of different questions there.
Yeah, maybe I asked too many questions.
That was a little bit.
So I guess the first question is, how do you manage the time, the scheduling between multiple partners, and deciding, do I spend time with this partner or that partner, and how much does each partner get throughout the week or throughout the month? I feel like that's something that maybe people looking from the outside or getting into this can see as overwhelming, trying to sort out they only have so many hours in a day, right? And so how do you divvy those hours up for yourself and for your partners?
Sure. I think that the first and foremost thing is to take care of myself and make sure that I am having my needs met. I'm someone who likes a lot of alone time, and that's how I de-stress and come back to myself. And so making sure that I've allotted that is important. I am new newish, to having more than one partner who I have significant feelings for, which is something that we can kind of circle back and touch on, because I've previously been dating a lot of people who are newer to non-monogamy.
Yeah.
Dating is very much the correct term there, rather than probably having relationships with those folks. So, I think that for me, I base my time around the same way that anyone sort of does when they have multiple needs in their lives, which is to say that people naturally ebb and flow about what their needs are and what they have going on. And sometimes that comes all in a rainstorm, shitstorm, if you will, all at once. And people are, more demanding of time. And that's certainly something to manage. And there are many podcasts and people who are well-versed in that sort of thing. And I've heard the term polysaturation.
Yeah.
Because there are only so many hours in a day. Right. But I don't know if I'm the best to articulate that.
So maybe backing up a little bit, I know you mentioned, so you ended that first, or that relationship that you first had started to open up. After that, how did you evolve, getting back to your story a little bit before we get into some of the more in-depth questions?
Sure. So I met Vaughn on Tinder, and we connected and enjoyed each other's company, and pretty quickly had a conversation about where we were separately in our dating lives and relationship styles, and those just so happened.
This was shortly after you ended that other relationship?
Yeah, within maybe 6 months or so.
Okay. I didn't know if it was like years apart.
Oh, right. So we really developed our relationship and designed our relationship sort of as we went, which is, something that sometimes poly people say is not a good idea. But we had both done a lot of research and read a lot of books and had been practicing, as you've heard in his podcast, some forms of non-monogamy prior to us meeting. So it was just kind of like, oh, wow, this is really great. We really like each other. Let's keep this super intensive communication going and figure out what it is that we want and what works for us as we sort of continue to mold this relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so prior to meeting him, were you also, it sounds like you were probably, you had mentioned you were exploring non-monogamy. Were you still dating multiple, just kind of dating around, trying to figure things out and see where it was at? Or
I was dating in the traditional sense of dating.
Okay. Yeah. And so with him, you guys that was sort of your first time experiencing having sort of a steady partner, and then also exploring outside of that, where it was more successful than the previous time, right?
Right. Yeah. The previous relationship I had, we were open for about 6 months before things ended.
Okay.
And that was more of a strict sexual connection outside of that primary relationship.
Okay. So do you mind talking a little bit about what some of those conversations looked like early on with Vaughn and with other partners about how you wanted to structure things?
Some of our conversations were about what our comfort levels and interest was in hearing about other people who we're dating or seeing. I think that can be kind of a hot topic for people and their comfort, and everyone's different in that. Some of it was certainly about time. And I think especially as we got further into our relationship, there's can be a relationship time creep of, things continually escalating and spending time together. And of course, we love each other, so we want to spend time together. But, we've taken another look at that, but that's down the line.
I think maybe I would be curious on your behalf. I know some people, who explore non-monogamy go down the don't ask, don't tell policy, right? Where you can do anything you want, I just don't want to hear about it. And then there's other people who feed off of hearing about what their partner's doing. And I guess for you, what have you found? What is your preference? Do you like to just pretend that it's not happening, or do you like to hear about what he's doing? And I guess maybe that brings in the compersion and hearing about what's making him happy.
Yeah. Okay. So thanks for phrasing that differently. So I am very much the opposite of don't ask, don't tell. And that was something that Vaughn and I connected on, and that's been an essential part of our relationship. We're very strong in the communication, and so we use that as a platform to get through troubling times and overcome challenges in our relationship. So I'm interested in learning what he's doing and what kind of relationships he's developing and his sexual experiences and vice versa. So at various times we've shared more or less depending on what we had going on. And I will say that I've learned about myself that I'm less likely to share details when I have a very deep connection with another partner. Those details about my relationship with that other person don't come as easily. And it's something that Vaughn and I have talked about and just found ways to still communicate about those intense relationships.
Right.
Because it's necessary and needed, I think, for our health.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess if you don't mind expanding on that a little, because I think that's something that probably translates beyond the poly world and into the swinging world too, which is you have an intense connection with somebody and you're almost a little shy, or I don't want to say ashamed, but you're afraid to tell your partner, like, yeah, I have an intense connection with this person, and you don't want to make them feel jealous, so you tend to dial it back a little bit. And so, I mean, if you don't mind talking a little more about that, because it sounds like you experienced something similar on the poly side where you want to hear everything about him, but when it gets intense for you, you have a hard time expressing that.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things that we've worked out together is to talk about things early. So when I come home from a date or there's something new, kind of a simmer burning
Yeah.
in my relationship life, that I acknowledge that pretty early. And that feels like an easier transition than letting things really evolve with that other person, and then it feels overwhelming to me to address that, which is one of the things that Vaughn and I experienced over the summer when I met Kevin. And I'll tell you a bit of a story about the polyest thing I've ever done. But certainly talking about things early. And then another strategy that we developed is to share photos, like just send each other photos when we're on a date, or just in the short time thereafter, like, hey, this is, me and so, and this is what we did, or whatever. And even emailing to say, this really great thing happened. And for me, that's feels a little bit easier than, like you said, it can feel pretty vulnerable to not know how someone's going to react or how I'm going to react.
Yeah.
And to admit that you have those feelings too, because you're admitting that to your partner that you're talking to, but also to yourself at that time when you're talking about it out loud.
Right. So true.
Yeah.
So
true.
I have a technical question of when you're sending, let's say you're on a date and you send a photo to one of your partners, do you tell the person you're on the date with, like, hey, I want to send a photo to my other partner? Or does that I feel like that could weird somebody out, but I also feel like if I was that person, I'd be like, oh, cool. Like, I don't know. I feel like that could go either way. How does that work in a practical sense?
Yeah, it definitely is part of the don't ask, don't tell.
Right.
So very much if you want to be in a relationship or have an interaction with me, I am going to talk about my other partners because they're part of my life. And when I talk about myself and my life, there are going to be stories that include other partners, and I'm going to name them.
Yeah.
And, I think that as new to swinging as I am, I feel like there's some component of acknowledgement that there's an element that turns that person, the other partner on. Like, I'm going to send this photo and hopefully the person who I'm on the date with can appreciate that.
Right. Yeah. Right. I have so many questions that I want to ask.
I know, but first off, I want to hear this story because you just
the polyest story ever.
Yeah.
Yes. So I had been dating through Tinder and Bumble and those sort of things, and even Field as an independent poly woman, let's say. And I was encountering a lot of people who were interested in non-monogamy, but hadn't explored that world at all. And I found that my filter was not very great for eliminating the people who were maybe not serious about non-monogamy or had some kind of, I don't want to say ulterior motive, but just a very surface level interest or intentions. So I found that very tiring.
Yeah. And I want to ask you a question about that a little bit more, but we can come back to that.
Okay. After dating many of these folks, that's such a strange adult word, but I had been dating a lot of these people, and Vaughn was had a new connection with a poly woman that I was aware of, and actually she and I had an open line of communication, which was so fantastic and something that I was new to, even just to say, hi, I exist, and if you need anything, that was so wonderful. So aside from that, I was on Field and I met a man and we started chatting, and I was very interested in him right off the bat. And as I learned a few more things about him, I said, this sounds a little bit like Vaughn's new girlfriend's partner. And so I messaged her and said, hey, am I talking to one of your partners? And so as it turned out, it was. And he and I went on a date, and my life kind of exploded, for lack of a better term. We had a very instant kind of intense connection, and that continued. And so suddenly I found myself from not dating anyone who is poly other than Vaughn, to being in some kind of quad situation of us all talking and being friends, and Kevin and Vaughn talk, and this girl and I are friends, and yeah.
Is that still going on?
It is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome, though.
Yeah. And out of curiosity, do you mostly identify as straight, or do you date women as well?
I'm new to dating women. Yeah. Okay. So I wouldn't say that I identify as straight, but I'm newer to dating women. So
yeah. That's a pretty awesome story, though. Like how you just, the situations you find yourself in that you would never have expected.
Yes. Yes. It was a lot to handle. It was a lot to digest.
Yeah.
In the best way. But it really made my life and my growth explode, that I was really being challenged in a lot of ways that I hadn't, and being confronted with things about myself that are both wonderful to learn and difficult to look at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, do you mind sharing maybe one or two of the things that you learned through that process, whether it was the difficult ones or the wonderful ones, or maybe one of each?
One of the things that we talked about earlier about early notification of a strong interest in someone, and how that can be helpful in facilitating communication with other partners. That was something I learned from that situation, because I felt pretty overwhelmed by the connection that I had with Kevin, and I wasn't sure how to talk about that. And not just with Vaughn, but really with anyone. So that was one of the things.
What were some ways that you worked through that?
I worked through that with Vaughn after it had happened. So it was more retrograde of us trying to work backwards, in a sense of me trying to explain the way that I was feeling. And little by little, that started to come out in conversations, and I felt that it was a challenge for me to say those things to him. And I think a lot of that probably has to do with fear, like we've talked about, with not knowing how someone will react. And it was new for me as well to have such strong feelings for more than one person. And so I felt I was dealing with that, in addition to notifying my partner that this was happening.
Right. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, at least you were able to look at it and work backwards and figure out where it was coming from, and get to a point where everybody was happy. I think that's the important part. Maybe you didn't hit a home run at the forefront, but you were able to work backwards and get there.
Yeah. And that's not always easy to work through. That's for sure. And to admit that you need to work through something like that.
Yes.
So that was the harder one. What was one that you said you also learned some things about yourself that were wonderful and amazing? Well, give yourself some redemption here. We can't just focus on the negative.
I felt easy to love in those circumstances, that I felt like love was abundant, and that was a really wonderful feeling to have two people who cared deeply for me.
Right.
I went through a pretty tumultuous time personally in my life, in the time that I was dating both Kevin and Vaughn, and my whole tribe was there for me, and their partner as well. And she sent me flowers, which was so wonderful and heartwarming, and I've never had a metamor relationship like I have with her.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So it's just the overwhelming joy and silver linings of having both of them there and feeling that love is abundant.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that
sounds amazing.
Yeah, you can't. Anytime you get to feel that you're wanted by multiple people, and not even wanted, but cared for, loved. Yeah, that's can't have too much of that.
So just backing up, I know I mentioned when you said you met a lot of people that were new to polyamory, you dated some of them, and open relationships. Did you feel, I guess, if I were in your shoes, I think I would feel partly like, oh, this is great. I'm teaching all of these people. I'm learning about who they are and teaching them about who I am, and open relationships. But also, I can imagine it's exhausting. Did you experience that? Or how did you feel as you navigated all of those newer relationships?
While I appreciate wanting to help people to find this great thing that I found, I don't really want to go on a date and teach.
And exactly. I can see that 100%.
And it took me a while to understand that that's what was happening, and how to change that for myself.
Almost like you should have a class instead of a date.
maybe check out the internet if you
listen to podcasts.
Listen to podcasts. So yeah, I found it trying to have those interactions sort of consecutively and frustrating because it wasn't really the connection that I was looking for. When I went on those dates, I left feeling like poly is not the most interesting thing about me. And that's what we spent the most time talking about because of their interest.
Right.
So I've changed my approach since I continue to date on quote unquote traditional dating sites like Tinder and Bumble, which is that I very boldly add that to my profile. I'm ethically non-monogamous. I find that people overlook that or do not know what that is. So very quickly within the first 2 or 3 messages, I say, hey, what's your experience with non-monogamy? And then we can have some kind of conversation about they don't know what non-monogamy is, or they're happy to share what their experience is. And I think that my threshold now for people who have no experience is pretty low, unfortunately. And I kind of protect my energies a little bit more closely now. Very bluntly say there are great podcasts and there are some great resources that I'm happy to send to you. And I don't mean that in a negative, facetious way. I'm just trying to help them while helping myself.
Yeah.
And
I think that makes
different places.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's a healthy way to approach it, that you're not shutting them out. You're willing to give them resources, but you're looking out for yourself. And honestly, that's the most important thing you need to do, not to be selfish, but to be able to take care of yourself and look for what you want.
Agreed.
Yeah. No, I think that's very fair. I had questions, and I know we're just like all over the board here, but that's
it's okay. You'll make it work. You'll circle it. Yeah.
But you mentioned earlier that you, in part of your oversharing with people, you hope that at some level that they find pleasure, whether it's compersion or sexual interest in hearing about what you've done. For yourself, I guess, how do you approach that? Do you find that hearing about your other partners provides that level of, like, whether it's like a sexual turn on or compersion, or I guess in that oversharing, what have you learned about yourself in terms of that?
I've learned that for me, compersion and, as you said, sexual interests run very close and overlap for me. So I've learned that there are 2 direct routes to compersion for me, which are meeting a metamor, and the second best is hearing about the pleasure that my partner gets from being with that person, really whether it's sexual or otherwise, but certainly sex helps.
Yeah. And on that same note, has it ever crossed over from compersion and like piquing your sexual interest to holy shit, I'm jealous, and now you're going down a different path? Or has it largely for you been green lights and everything's been good?
No, I mean, poly is hard. It is, yes, non-monogamy is hard. We can just put that umbrella, right?
Yes, non-monogamy is hard.
That we have swinging and like that. That is getting in there. It's tough.
Yeah.
So no, it hasn't been rainbows and unicorns, and that's been a lot of introspective work that I've done with myself. You know, looking at, is this a me thing? Is this an us thing? Or is this a partner, an otherwise partner thing? And what role do I play in my feelings and emotions? And I tend to have more I feel a bit more challenged when there's an emotional connection involved rather than a partner of mine who is having a sexual experience. I find that I'm pretty easily turned on by that, and I have a little bit more hesitation when my partner is in love and having those sexual experiences, and I wonder how much of that plays on my own inability to share when I'm having an intense emotional relationship, and am I really just projecting that onto them? So These are sort of some of the things when I talk about introspective, what is it that I own versus my partner owning?
Yeah, that makes total sense. It sounds like you found that if there's not a ton of emotion involved, it's kind of a sexual turn on for you. You mentioned a few times swinging and that you're new to that. Has that sort of been the path or the light at the end of the tunnel that was like, hey, maybe this is a way to look, where it's the sexual experiences without so much of the emotional attachment to it?
So Vaughn and I have had a couple of experiences, all of them good. The interesting portion that bridges these two ideas for me is that I've found that one of the things that I really enjoy about swinging with Vaughn is our pleasure dynamic, because I feel very safe in the space that I share with him, and that allows me to have pleasure from other people. I think that pleasures can be a very vulnerable thing, and I think that to have him there with me, it allows kind of this loophole, let's say, to experience other people in a way that I might not have otherwise.
Yeah, I think that's a fascinating way to look at it, is because pleasure can be very vulnerable. And I never actually put those words together, but I think it makes a lot of sense. And having that partner with you during that experience. Yeah.
So I'm curious, when you were way back at the beginning, starting your journey, and you had gone down the open relationship path, you had explored, it sounded like, more sexual based encounters, and that it didn't really work for you, but now you're starting to explore the swinging side of things, which, again, it's not that it's totally void of emotion and feeling, but it is a little more focused on the sexual side of things. How do you make that shift back to that? It seems counterintuitive to why you got into poly to start with, and now you're kind of exploring back a little bit.
Yeah, I think that it's the issue that I had with a strictly primary, non-emotional open relationship was the restriction portion.
Okay.
So in poly, and hopefully in swinging, certainly with my poly partner, I know that I don't have the restriction of certain boundaries that they are placing on me. So if I were to say, have a great time with a swinging couple, that I could pursue that on my own and feel totally within bounds to do that.
Okay.
And create a whole nother relationship based on, the compatibility of the three of us and not necessarily the four of us, and sort of having that flowing energy and connection.
Sure. Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Changing the topic completely.
Again.
I know. With this interview, we are kind of all over the place.
That's all right. People will figure it out.
No, you had mentioned I like to give the listeners a little bit of a view of the person that we're talking to outside of your non-monogamous relationships. So is there some hobbies or something about you that you don't mind sharing that you have, or interests or anything that can, tell people a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, you're not just a sex fiend who goes on dates 22 hours a day. Or maybe you are. I don't know. Well, I guess we'll find out.
Hopefully I could stay up that many hours. I am someone who loves the sunshine. I like books and yoga.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that a lot of the things that we name about ourselves can be very generic. And I think that the things that make us unique are the ways in which we interact with the world and do those things, and the sort of philosophies that we hold, that how we see ourselves and how we see others can help to shape who we are when we're doing the yoga and the reading. And I love to stop and say hi to dogs on the street, and and I go wakeboarding, and so that's kind of my philosophy on
that's awesome.
naming things. And that's maybe part of the challenge that some people face when creating a dating profile, because these things can sound pretty generic, like, hey, I do things.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Everyone does things. They just might be different things.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So
now we're just deviating, but it doesn't matter. It's our podcast, and we'll do whatever we want. So you said it's hard sometimes to write a dating profile because you feel like you're just listing things that you do. If you were able to do it verbally over audio on a podcast, how would you advertise yourself? I'm just curious. That way,
way to put her on the spot.
Well,
Jeez.
no, this way, when she gets contacted by some polyamory noob, she can say, "Hey, go listen to Normalizing Non-Monogamy," and you'll know everything you need to know.
True.
Oh wow, I genuinely had not thought about that, and it scares me, honestly.
It would scare me too. I don't know how I would answer that question.
It scares me that I could tell someone to come listen to this podcast. Wow.
You don't have to do that. I was just saying it's an option.
I think that some of it I summed up earlier, but I like to talk about traits versus things that I do. So I try every day. It's a practice to be compassionate and be compassionate for myself. And that leads me to have non-judgment and loving understanding for other people. I practice every day honesty and radical transparency, which means to me that I'm honest with myself. And like Emma was saying earlier about disclosing to a partner your feelings about someone that you're dating and really having that sort of blow back on yourself in a way. So being transparent with my partners and showing up and saying what's real for me, even if that doesn't look very pretty, and having that be how it is and owning that. So I guess those are some of the things that I hope for people to see about me. But dating profiles and that, I just don't see it happening.
Yeah. Well, that's why we're better than any dating profile.
I think that was a great response.
Yeah, no, that was fantastic. And I think it's hard to, like you said, it's hard to explain those things in 250 words or less. And not only that, but most people are never gonna read that far. And I know that's kind of unfortunate. We've experimented briefly with like OkCupid, and it was clear that people don't read, and that's unfortunate because it's hard though. I mean, yeah, it's tough. So I don't know where I was going with that. What's that?
Do you find yourself repeating what's in your profile when people ask questions, or?
Oh, no one ever contacted me, so didn't have any trouble. Never had to repeat anything.
I did, and I had a few people reach out. Well, a few people that I actually cared to respond to, because other people, I'm a type of person that I do like to respond to everybody, but some messages don't even require, I don't think are considered enough for a response.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And sometimes OkCupid can be crickets.
Yes.
Right.
See,
So,
maybe it wasn't you.
yeah. Yeah.
It's not.
No.
So, yeah, no, I think we see that too on the Cassidy side of things. Like on our personal profile, we have at the very top in bold letters that we are not currently living in the city we're from and that we're traveling. And I would say every 2 weeks we get a message like, hey, do you guys want to go get dinner? It's like,
you clearly didn't read our profile.
Like, yeah, we're going to go get dinner tonight, but we're 8,000 miles away, so it's going to be tough.
Like, we love getting messages and just say, like, we'd love to communicate with you, but we can't just go get dinner right now.
Yeah. So, all right, back to the...
Yeah. Do you have any other questions?
I guess I'm just overall very fascinated. So one of the reasons that I find the non-monogamy thing so fascinating is it's fascinating for me to hear what other women are thinking, whether it's on the poly side or on the sexual side. And so it's something to me that I could ask a billion questions, and this could be like a 6-hour interview. So
refrain from doing that.
I will try to dial it back. But yeah, I think maybe just curiosity about where you see things going for you in the future, and or maybe what you hope. Like, what is your ideal at the moment, knowing that it probably shifts and changes, but like, is it 10 different partners? Is it one partner where you guys do swinging? And I guess, what is your dream situation, or is it just ever evolving?
My dream situation is happiness and fulfillment, whatever that looks like. I plan to travel in the future as well. So I enjoy relationships where there is lots of flexibility, and that, again, we're sort of living in that gray space that we can make things look however we want to and what feels best for us. So I do have some kind of aspirations of spending a certain amount of time with a partner, maybe more intensely, and then traveling and, having other partners. I'm interested in continuing to explore the swinging world, and I think that I would like for that to be a part of my future. And I've struggled a little bit with, I guess, the spectrum of meeting or going to parties rather, and I guess kind of meeting someone or some couple on the fly and having sex with them versus having an ongoing friendship and getting to know people and swinging with them, and sort of what that looks like and feels like and how accessible that is. I jumped right into the cold, hard world of clubs in Miami.
Wow.
For my first swing experience. And it was a lot.
I've never been to those clubs, but I can only imagine.
Yeah. There was some actual shit.
Like, literally?
Literally. Yes. It was not something that I was familiar or had seen before.
I think you might have to elaborate on this.
Like, I went to the club 2 nights in a row, and both nights there was feces on the floor or on the bench. I am not sure. I was not there to witness it, but certainly I saw it and smelled it.
Wow.
I was looking for a room to play with someone, and
that wasn't the room, huh?
They weren't even gonna clean it out. They brought us a can of Lysol.
Well, I mean, if you spray it on there, it's fine. It just disinfects it, and then it's no problem.
Oh my gosh.
So just a quick disclaimer. I'd say we've been doing the swinging thing for the better part of 10 years. never once have we encountered that.
No.
So,
must have been your lucky first experience.
I guess we need to go to Miami if we want that in our lives.
I guess so.
So, yeah, do you mind talking more about the contrast in the poly versus the swinging, and what are some things that you found that you really like about the swinging versus that you prefer on the poly side? Or is in your brain, is it just two completely different worlds?
No, I think there's certainly a lot of overlap. I guess what comes to mind first about swinging is the partnership aspect, that you kind of maybe, for the most part, like win and lose together.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't say that in the sense of someone having sex and someone not, because I think that for most swinging couples, hopefully there's some compersion and excitement for the other person, whether, that partner is, you yourself are having sex or not, or have it playing or whatever. So I like that aspect. And same going for dating when it comes to swinging. Like, hey, let's go out on this date with this couple. And that's sometimes much more fun than going out on a date by yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's one thing that we found enjoyable is when you go on a date together, even if it's a total failure. Now
you mean with another swinging couple?
Right. Yeah. All of our dates together are absolute successes, just you and me.
Yeah, of course.
But if we go with another couple, right, and then it's a total failure, you leave there, at least you have a fun story and somebody to commiserate with, right?
You get to laugh the whole way home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
I love that.
Yeah. One
of the ways that I apply that to my single life is I come up with really fun, creative dates that I like, that we go and do something, so that way, even if it's a miss, I've still done something fun.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good way to do it too. That something you enjoy no matter what, and then if it's like this person we do not have compatibility, it doesn't matter. I'm still doing something fun.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually a really smart strategy, and also one thing that I am aware of is that by doing something new or something exciting, that's triggering the dopamine. So you're gonna have more fun anyway. So yeah, I think that's awesome. What are some of the things you've done? Now I'm just curious, like fun dates that you've orchestrated.
Like free concerts in the park.
Okay.
Or art exhibits, or new skills that we can learn together.
Yeah, those are great examples.
Yeah. No, it's been a long time since I've had to go on a first date. I've actually never gone. No, I think like once.
You've gone on, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway. That's not the topic.
No, I'm going to have to edit a lot.
I know. You're all over the place tonight.
I don't know how. I feel like editing would be equivalent to re-listening to a lecture.
But I will say that a lot of times, like, I don't know, we have so much fun doing these interviews that when I go back and listen to them and edit them, very rarely does it feel tedious, because I enjoy listening to them so much.
Yeah, and then I usually re-listen to every one before it goes live as well. So
that's really cool.
Yeah, they're a lot of fun.
Well, is there anything that we haven't touched on that you want to touch on?
I did want to talk about my displeasure of the phrase NRE. Are you familiar with that term?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think that for me, NRE discounts the relationship in some ways, and to me it can seem kind of dismissive, that in the same way, like, oh, you were drinking and that's why, blah blah blah, like, oh, well, they just have NRE and that's probably not going to last, and that's, whatever. So I think it can be kind of discounting.
But so before we continue, for listeners who don't know what that is, can you define it as well?
New relationship energy.
Yeah.
So the excitement and joy of getting to know someone new.
And it can also be on the sexual side too, right? Like, oh, well, we're having sex 7 days a week, twice a day, but that's only because we just met, right? So it can manifest itself in many ways. So
yeah.
But in your experience or in your opinion, you're not a fan because it discounts maybe the actual connection?
I think that it can. Yeah. I guess I'm offering it as maybe to be a little bit mindful of or weary when we're throwing it around.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah, it's very fair. And offers a really good other perspective that no one else has brought up that we've talked to, at least that I remember.
Yeah. One thing that we like to touch on, if you don't mind us asking, is how do you navigate and manage your safety inside of the non-monogamy world? Whether it's, and we can talk about it from a few different aspects. One would be going on, maybe multiple first dates and making sure that you're staying safe physically, but then also your sexual health and making sure that you're maintaining, a healthy lifestyle when you're potentially having multiple sexual partners, more than your average person, potentially.
Let's hope so.
Yeah. if you're doing it right.
Yeah.
So as far as my physical safety, I have read about and created a system of a code word. So, or I guess sort of a series of code words. So if I call my designated person and say, I'm having a really fabulous time, then they know that maybe they should check in with me in a few minutes. And if I use another phrase, that's like a different sort of escalation that things are not going very well.
Right.
Always have someone who knows where I'm going to be if I'm not in a public place with that person, whether it be that date I'm taking them back to my place, or it's a third date, or whatever the case may be, that I send them the address or I share my location on my iPhone, which is also very convenient.
Yeah. And I think that plays into your strategy of communicating clearly with your partners, and that you have those open lines of communication, that if you were in a don't ask, don't tell type relationship, and not to say that those are the wrong way to go, but because you're not doing that, you can text Vaughn or Kevin or whoever and say, I'm going to be here and I expect to be done roughly around this time. If you don't hear from me, maybe come looking for me.
Yeah, totally. So. And I'm new also to the BDSM realm, which I understand to be a whole nother aspect of safety.
Yeah.
Something that I'm starting to read about and very slowly navigate, because I don't want to get into any unsafe situations, but I am interested in exploring BDSM. So some things to think about.
Yeah.
Part 2 of the Aleah interview.
My second date didn't go very well the other night. You guys helped to reschedule so I could go on a second date.
Oh yeah, yes.
As part of our 6-month-long foreplay, you had to reschedule at the last second the last time for a second date, or was it? It was a first date or second date?
It was a second date.
I'm glad it went well.
Yeah, it's always nice when the best thing about a second date is the reassurance that the spark and the connection that you felt on a first date wasn't a fluke.
Yeah.
Right. It wasn't just NRE.
Exactly.
Just had to poke the bear a little.
Yeah.
So just to circle back real quick on the sexual health and safety side of things, what are some things that you do to handle that and mitigate any risks as much as possible?
Yeah, so I feel very comfortable talking about sexual health, and it's something that I bring up matter-of-factly, and it comes up, it comes up always, first of all, and it comes up in different contexts in some ways, depending on how things are going to go or what sense I get. So if I'm dating someone and it seems like things are going in a sexual direction or that our next step is physical, I will say, hey, I have something really sexy to show you, and send them my results.
Yeah.
And I just had a partner who was like, oh, wow, I've never seen this approach before. And I was like, well, let me, help you with all of the ins and outs of sexual health. And he said his reaction was that he was planning to use condoms. And I said, awesome. Condoms are awesome. Here's a place that does testing for free.
Yeah.
Because I am comfortable with know your status.
Mm-hmm.
So that's certainly something that I talk about frequently.
Yeah. So in that situation, do you put the brakes on things sexually with somebody until they know their status and then you know their status? Even if they're like, I'm going to put 7 condoms on.
That's not a good idea. Anyway.
Yes, it depends on the situation and some of the physical. Like, I will gladly have, be fingered by someone or give someone a hand job where there's no, I guess, penetrative sex. And those things I think are underrated.
Yeah.
I love to go back to that.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. I think, talk about 6 months of foreplay.
Right. And we've done none of that, though. To be clear, we have not done that.
So yeah, I think that there are great opportunities and silver linings there.
Sure.
In the realm of sexual health. So that's how I see it.
So I'm curious, and this is an approach that we take, and we've seen taken when we host or have partaken in group situations. And one of the things that we do beforehand is we create like a circle, and everybody just kind of goes around the circle and shares what they're into in terms of interests, things that are off limits, whether it's always or that night. And
sexually, to be clear.
Sexually, yeah. I mean, you could talk about wakeboarding and whatever, but it's mostly like, hey, I'm into this, this, and this. I don't do this, this, and this. And then you talk about your testing status and when you were last tested and what the results were. If you were on a date with somebody and things seemed to be going that way, and they were just very blunt about that and said, hey, tonight I'm feeling like I want to do X, Y, and Z. I'm not really feeling this thing or that thing, and this is my status. For you, would that be a mood killer, or would you embrace that pretty openly and be like, hey, cool, I'll play, and here's my answers to all those questions back at you?
I think that communication is really sexy, for starters.
Right.
Yeah, I think that we should ask for what it is that we want, and that goes both ways. So I certainly enjoy when my partner can communicate with me about their interests, and if that's on a first date, that's great. And I think that even if I'm on a date and it doesn't seem like the physical aspect is accelerating very quickly, I at least like to acknowledge the existence of sex.
Right.
Like, hey, probably if we continue to see each other at some point, we're going to have sex. That's not what I say, but just in a sense.
Right.
So, and the other portion of my answer is, I guess I'm not sure how I feel about this, but I really prefer to see test results.
Yeah.
Like, I think that we live in a digital age. I know that I'm going to send mine, and that's just what I prefer. And I'm not sure sort of how that works in the spanking community. I mean, do you pull it up on your phone while you're at a party, or,
Yeah, and I think a lot of that is situational, but typically what we've seen is you try to have the conversation, and And unfortunately, a lot of that is reading body language from people. And if they're like, oh, yeah, I think I got tested like 6 months ago and I think everything was fine. Like, you can start to pick up on things, right? But if they're fairly confident, like, oh, I did this, 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 and this, and these were my answers, these are the results, you can kind of play it off like that. And I think, yeah, it's something I wish was more, and that's something that we're trying to make more common and more accepted.
Yeah. I mean, in a perfect world, you would see the paper results and be able to have, or digital results, and be able to have a conversation around that. But sometimes that's not always practical, especially if you're at a club or a house party or something like that. And you just have to use your best judgment. And I also acknowledge that, you know, when you're having sex with more than one person, you are, or even one person, when you're having sex at all, you're putting yourself at some sort of risk, and you're acknowledging that. Yeah. And but you can put yourself at a somewhat educated risk and knowledgeable risk. And I think that's what we always try to navigate, and also try to teach and encourage other people to make sure you have that conversation. Because we definitely we've encountered couples and people in the swinging side of the life of non-monogamy where they don't have those conversations, and that's really unfortunate. I think it's a very important part.
And not only, and they don't like to because they think it's a mood killer and it's not sexy. No. But and that's kind of why I was prodding you for it, because as somebody who's a representative of the community and a female representative of the community, where a lot of things revolve around your interest and your willingness to partake, right? You hear people talk in the swinging side of things that everything hinges off of the woman and whether it's a go, no go. And that's a whole different topic, but I kind of wanted to put it out there for you, being like, do you find these things sexy, or at least not a turnoff, to where having that conversation is a benefit rather than a detraction to the mood? So I was just making you a representative for all women everywhere. So you're welcome.
Yikes. I think that the other thing that Emma touched on that I wanted to come back to is that I think that it's a balance of knowing your status and making educated choices with your body and with sexuality, and the balance of not shaming and sexually transmitted infections are, for the most part, just that, infections. For instance, the flu is primarily transmitted because many people don't wash their hands. Yeah. But we don't blame someone when they get the flu because probably they put their hands in their mouth or they weren't washing their hands. But we're quick to shame someone for having an STI that we can treat with antibiotics. Yeah. So I think it's a balance for sure.
And there's also there's a lot of medications out there to treat things, like you said. There's also ways to play very safe, to minimize any risk if you're worried about it as well. I mean, condoms are, of course, wonderful, but there's also gloves and dental dams and saran wrap and a lot of ways to play that you can do so even more safely than you might think.
Yeah. And I hope that you are being ambassadors for bringing those to the swinging world.
Yes, we're trying to.
We do our damnedest. So, and I didn't mean to drag you into that world kicking and screaming. It was just it's fun in a weird way to hear what other people, how they feel about those conversations, and hearing from you, somebody in your 30s who's balancing between the poly world and the swinging world, and the having those conversations for you is not necessarily a turn on, but it enhances it in the sense that now you have the full picture before you go in. So
yeah, and it's a turn on in that again, communication is a turn on for me. So
Right.
I love it when someone is up for having those conversations. And I know that it's a really good marker if that feels comfortable with them.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for indulging my long-winded questions. Sometimes multi-part questions. I don't know why I've got so many 7-part questions today.
I don't know. You've been throwing them at her.
All right. Well, I think maybe it would be a good time to ask if there's any major resources that you wanted to recommend for people that you have found useful, whether it's on the swinging side or the poly side or just the conversation and communication side, before we let you get back to your Sunday evening.
My favorite sort of communication-based resource is that of Brene Brown. She writes on shame and vulnerability, and I think that she is a great place to start if you're looking to expand your self-awareness and practice being non-judgmental. I like Polyland is a .com that I've looked at in the past, but I think that I'm pretty mainstream in my resources as far as what people have mentioned on your podcast in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Fair enough. We'll allow that.
Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to mention or bring up? I know we asked you that once already, but is there anything else? Cover everything?
Yeah. I wrote some notes, but I hope you can edit all the things.
Hey, this one was on me.
Yeah.
Normally when I have to edit, it's not my fault, but this time it's all me, so.
No, you had some great insight.
Yeah, 100%.
If it helps, I really appreciated the ability to pause and gather my thoughts.
Oh,
yeah.
Absolutely. So, well, thank you for taking some time out of your Sunday evening to blabber on with us. Well, I blabbered, you spoke coherently. And
That is very
and we look forward to part 2 where we talk about the world of Aleah in the BDSM world. And
yeah.
And until then, thank you and have a wonderful evening.
Yes, thanks again.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
Hello, you back.
We're back.
How do we do on those questions? Yikes.
It was a little all over the place.
But Aleah's a badass and Vaughn's a badass, and no wonder those two badasses found each other.
Yeah, that's true.
That's what I'm thinking.
So now if you haven't gotten to listen to episode 26, go listen to that one.
And now you can listen to that one, then you can listen to this one, and then you can listen to that one again, and then, I don't know, maybe just keep doing that, or listen to a different one.
I was like, there's a lot of other options.
In the meantime, you know what? Go check out Cassidy. That is our way of meeting other sexy people like Vaughn and Aleah, who, you know what? They're on Cassidy.
Yeah. And now you can get a 6-month free trial.
And you got to do nothing other than go to our website, click on the damn links,
and
use
them.
There. Yeah. So.
And our website is normalizingnonmonogamy.com. You can also find us on Twitter and on Cassidy under the screen name NNM Podcast.
And we're on the Instagram too. I think it's NNM Podcast there.
I believe, yes. That's new. We're starting to post stuff there too.
Yeah, all of one posts. But there'll be more. Now, we see everybody next week for episode
44 with Front Porch Swingers,
which is a podcast that has started about
2 or
3 months ago, and they're rocking it. They tell some sexy ass stories.
Mm-hmm.
I won't talk like that again. I promise. And yeah, so we'll see them in 1 week, and you in 1 week.
Bye, everyone.